Now, though, we want to continue our discussion on the rally in oil prices and the turmoil in Libya with an analyst who's been following the oil market for more than 40 years. He's witnessed Gulf wars, oil crises, and even revolutions and their impact on the global energy market, which is why we called him for this. Charlie Maxwell is senior energy analyst at Weeden Co. Pleasure to have you on the show, Charlie. Let's talk first of all about how you put this into the context of your experience. I mean, how big a deal is what's going on right now in the Middle East compared to what you've seen over your career?
It's quite small relative to the days of the embargo and the long lines that many people remember in this country. That was a real cut of maybe 50%. This is a cut of maybe 4%. So this is just fearful because it has the possibilities of morphing into something more serious, and we should pay attention to it as it starts because it could develop into something.
Well, and
but it hasn't yet.
I think that's the point, Charlie. I think we're all trying to figure out how likely is it that it gets to Saudi Arabia. I think that's what we're really worried about. I mean, for folks who watch the energy markets, are they betting that that's what's going to happen, or it's still too early to tell?
Well, I think it's still too early to tell, and I think that if there is a bet, it's so far that the Saudis will hold their balance and stay. But you know, if you think about the four great pillars of the oil business, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, and Iraq, the first one is stable, and the other three are very questionable. And the other three are not as important as the Saudis, but put together, they're terribly important.
And we were talking before the program, and you were on Charlie Rose last night, and you've been saying, you know, in revolutions like this, the problem isn't just what happens, for example, in Libya, but if Gaddafi goes, then the opposition will be infighting in Libya, plus they have ties to other countries. Each gets weapons and money from outside, and eventually you have different countries embroiled in this kind of thing.
Yes, and it does progress that way. I mean, one could look at revolutions, the French, the Bolshevik, the Russian, and going into the Bolshevik period, and you can just see these patterns emerging, and what they are is exactly what you said. Once the strong man or the strong regime is removed, the opposition splits immediately into its own views and its own armies, and they begin to thrash it out among each other.
We have Massar out today, Charlie, and they're talking about oil prices could go to $220 a barrel if political unrest in North Africa halts exports from Libya and Algeria. I mean, is that a real price in your view of where we could go?
I think
a doubling, essentially, more than a doubling of where we are today.
Yeah, it's not a bad price, but I think the chances that all of that oil would be cut off in Libya and Algeria, both, is pretty small. Now, the Saudis have offered, as you know, to step forward and make up the Libyan amount, about 1.7 or 1.8, and frankly, that is possible. So the Libyan one alone cut off doesn't bother me so much.
Right.
But if Algeria went down, then we don't have any extra supplies to give anybody, and we're in trouble.
What do you think, though, about the price we're looking at now? I mean, we hit $100 today. We're at $98.26 a barrel right now. Even taking away what we see in the Middle East, I mean, do you think that that's too cheap for oil, considering your views, especially on peak oil?
Well, it certainly is too cheap relative to where I think we'll be 5 years or 7 years from now. Right for now, we're actually in a pretty good position. We're just coming out of the recession, and we're not using too much oil. We have about 5 million barrels a day of unused capacity in the system, which the Saudis have the majority of. And so I think we're all right for the moment. It's just that if a combination of these things went down, you can imagine a situation where Nigeria gets into trouble, because they're always getting into trouble.
At the same time, if you just step back and look at the fundamentals of the energy market, oil specifically, I mean, longer term, whether that's 3 years, 5 years, I mean, we're headed higher. I mean, that's just the trajectory that we're on.
Carol, I think you're absolutely right.
So give me an idea, 3 to 5 years, we talk about this no more price, but will in 3 years 200 seem like a low price because of the strong demand for oil?
Well, let's look at the good side of this. I mean, you could argue that since this thing is going to gradually, as we recover and as the older oil fields begin to give way and the new oil fields are small in number and can't replace it. If all these things take place the way we think it's going to, then we're going to be 5 years from now in something of a fix. Well, now, do we want to wait 5 years to do anything about that? Well, the answer that most people would say is yes. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't know whether it's coming or not. The experts are always telling me all this guff and so on. But if we have an emergency now, it's going to get everybody upset, and there is a positive side to it. We may get out there and say, you know what? This thing is very dangerous, and we're hanging on the edge of a razor.
And you're saying this would be different from, I think, of the lines when there were the double lines and the even odd license plates. I mean, we had crises before and people kind of blew it off once we got through it. You think this is different? It is different this time around, potentially.
Yes, because on the other side of it is more crisis. And particularly so for something that Matt said, which is that history shows that the settling down process after you've gotten rid of the old regime can take 10 to 15 years, and a lot of people are killed, and civil wars are breaking out left and right. We may be into a destabilized period in the Middle East for a long time.
Doesn't sound good. Hey, Charlie, thank you so much. Charlie Maxwell joining Matt and me here on set.